Man, I'm good, man. I'm just trying to stay on top of everything. How the babies?
Babies are growing, man.
All right.
Love my little girls. They turn into little women. It's crazy.
All right. So we hold on, let me get this muted. All right. So we live on YouTube, we in, and I think everybody should looks like everybody's logged in. All right, people. Welcome to the Onyx Report special edition. We're gonna have a bang up session today that I'm excited about. We only got a few people in, so we're gonna give some people some time to come in, and we're still waiting on a couple of folks. So I'm gonna let you guys kind of come in a little bit. Just make sure. I don't know what's going on with my Facebook connection, but let's see. I want to make sure that one's working. Okay, good. All right, so we're good on it. There we go. So we got that muted. Everything is up, and we are looking like we are rocking. So it's going to be a lively one. Folks, please support the show. As you come in, we're going to have a pretty big one today. As you guys know from checking the link, we got the esteemed Dr. Curry. We got the esteemed BGS. We got who else we got in the building? We got Dr. Ronald Neal. We got the G with the Ph.D. We got Hood Scholar. We got Artisan. And soon enough, I'm more than sure we will have Valdez. So we're going to let brothers go to task. And the question on the table is definitely one that I think is more than past due. And we done jumped from 4 people to 100 in about 5 seconds. Yeah, wow. So it's definitely going on. So what I'm gonna do?
Those other brothers are drawing you a crowd, but
it's just okay, all of y'all are killing it. Well, I'm gonna put a little context to this, because I want to kind of explain why I did this show. So one of the things I've been having is brothers have started to reach out to me and DM me and inbox me about some of the discussions and debates that they're having on different platforms. And one of the most consistent things that they keep hearing is that, black men are not showing up to protests. Black men are too afraid to show up. They don't care enough. Of course, there's the narrative that we don't protect women. So all of those kind of things are happening. People are telling them that, black women are saving the community and black men are just kind of hiding behind their skirt tails. All these kinds of, narratives that we're hearing. And they reminded me of some of the same narratives that I heard 5 years ago, when Michael Brown was killed, and even a little before that with Trayvon. But I've been hearing the same kinds of narratives, and I'm just kind of like, okay, this is old. It's getting to be predictable. I think brothers can go in on where it comes from. So, I've been hearing these things for a while, but they came back up again fresh in the last, couple weeks, really, but especially the last couple months. And it's the same played out kind of narrative. And so some of what I wanted us to tackle, I said, well, let me get some brothers together and see what we could deal with about how black men perceive protest activism. Right. Is it the end all to be all? Are brothers afraid to be to be involved in protest activism? Do we base that solely on what we see reported in the media? Are black men present? Are they not present? And then we have this whole different aspect to it that I've been witnessing where you have, how do I put this? You have a lot of these people on social media, on Twitter and on Facebook, making these comments, and the images that are up there suggest that they're supposed to be black women, and they're making these statements like, you niggas can't die fast enough. You don't protect. I had 5 of them come up in my platform last night in my Facebook talking about Breonna Taylor's boyfriend was scared and he was in on it because she got shot 8 times and he didn't get 1 bullet, so he was actually in on it. I mean, it's but then sometimes you go to these people's pages and they don't have any friends. You know what I mean? They don't have history. and they're saying the most vile stuff, like, you know, we shouldn't have black male babies, you know, all this kind of craziness. And so I said, you know, it looks like to some extent there's also what I call this kind of neo COINTELPRO kind of dynamic happening.
Yeah, yeah.
Where, you know, because it's much easier now, right? You know, you don't necessarily have to have trained agents going in and directly interacting with people like you did in the 70s. Now you just you have a Twitter page, and, you know, and there's a couple levels to that we can get into, but a lot of this just seems contrived. And I said, well, let me gather together some brothers, and I want to get their opinions. So what we're going to do is brothers are going to come up, you know, after, you know, Dr. Curry, and each brother's going to give their opinion about it, and then we'll kind of open it up for some dialogue. And Dr. Curry has been kind enough to join us, as everybody should know. He is in Scotland, University of Edinburgh, chair of the first Black male studies program in the world, as far as I know. And he's been kind enough to join us from 8 hours ahead. So that's one of the reasons that I wanted to get him in first, because he didn't already put in a full day, and I just rolled out of bed about, you know, a minute ago. So yeah, man, we don't have no time in my house right about now, man.
Yeah.
We get up and fall asleep when it happens. So 2 o'clock in the afternoon for everybody else is like 3 in the morning for me. So, you know, but if we could just get you started, kind of lead us off, man. What are your thoughts about protest activism and Black men, and what is it that we're missing? What is it that we're overlooking? You know, let's get into it a little bit. We got 200 people watching now. Please get the likes up. Please share and subscribe. If you're on YouTube, get the lights up. You know, support the show. I want to shout out real quick, Malika. Thanks for the support. Torrance, appreciate that. Sosa, appreciate that. You know, brothers were donating before the show even started, so they saw some of the names, I think. Extended Clips, appreciate the support. JBA, Mr. Meach, you know, appreciate that. 2MC, Man Friday, Sam I Am, good looking out. Kalonja Kala, forgive me if I mispronounced that, appreciate that support. And then we got Anu, appreciate that. Valdez just walked up in here. J. Jermaine, appreciate the support. Valdez was reporting from the car a little bit earlier and transferred to the home studio. So we about to see the Sith Temple in a little bit when he comes on up. I always love it when I can make that brother smile. Anyway, so Dr. Curry, start us off. Tell me about what your thoughts are on this.
Well, look, you know, I've been seeing a lot of the social media debates, you know, from over here, and it's unsettling. I think that Black people in America really have to start doing a better job understanding where the history and the rhetoric that they're using comes from. Because I've seen a lot of things that truly do resemble, you know, Moynihan-esque type of arguments, and it's interesting to me because as much as Black academics, especially Black American, our Black American feminists, criticize the Moynihan Report, they seem to have no problem endorsing the argument that Black men are weaker, have no motivation to succeed, and have dropped out of the race. You know, one of the arguments that Moynihan is bringing forward to the 1960s when he's writing the report, carrying over from some of the ghetto culture literature, is that in Black culture, Black men are not patriarchs; it's matriarchal, right? And the argument behind that is, well, Black women are the ones who are more the economic heads of household. They're more politically astute because they're more educated. They've assimilated more aspects of white culture, whereas Black men remain subcultural, violent, and outside of mainstream society. So, you know, even people like Patricia Collins have written about this idea of strong women, weak men. But the irony is that she claims that it's Black men who are attached to this idea. And this is why Black men embrace things like Black nationalism. But it's fascinating to me because it seems that the other side of the coin is Black women take on this idea that they're in fact the default leaders of the race, and then because they're doing protests in a moment where Black men are being slaughtered by the thousands over the last few years by cops, that somehow that means that it gives them a position to start determining what they think the worth of black men actually are. And I find this to be extremely problematic because it's not political analysis, it's just rhetoric, right? It's the idea that black men are not doing what black women see themselves as doing in the community. So then black men are weak, or black men are cowards because they're not showing up to protest. And we have no way of knowing if that's true or false. But what I'm saying is that the idea that we can comment on black men's choice as a group to protest or not protest merely as an issue of their manhood, an issue of their courage or cowardice, is a real problem for me. Because what's happened in the United States is that the political spectrum has become extremely narrow. We don't have really philosophical debates about perspectives, Pan-Africanists, socialists, etc. We have arguments between liberals, feminists, and everybody else. So the spectrum of black politics doesn't really have a radical orientation. It just has a very specific liberal one that's either leftist or feminist. And the effect of this is that black men become erased, they become objectified, and they become siloed. Black men are the majority of those dying. That means that any way the group decides to deal with that reality, right, is on them. Like there's no other period or there's no other political stance that's been embraced at this moment where people would say that black men get to tell black women how to deal with their oppression, how to deal with their disproportionate representation in certain demographics or models. So why is it on the other side that black women seem to be chastising black men nationally? Right? These are national discussions where black men are being called violent, where black men are being called weak, where they're being called pathological, as if they can't care for themselves. And this is a very, very dangerous idea. And notice, this isn't just a gender argument. This is an argument saying that black men have no viable political platform. And I think we saw this reiterated and confirmed during this last year's Democratic primaries, because every group of black people in America had a specific policy for them. Black women had a policy. Black same-sex couples, homosexuals had a policy coming out of the Democratic National Convention. Black trans issues were at the forefront, and that's all fine and well. Nobody's against that being a platform. Well, how is it that black men who keep showing economic downward mobility, black men who are overrepresented in mass incarceration and certainly in the statistics of police homicide, don't get any kind of national agendas or platform appeals coming out of the Democratic National Party? And what this means is that some of the ideas that are coming from the left don't really have black men as a viable population. They don't have them as a block. So we see a complete erasure of black men's political posture. We see a complete erasure of black men's consciousness about their own ills. And what's more importantly, you see that the arguments about black men coming out of the media, the so-called liberal, progressive, feminist, intersectional media, are in fact reifying many of the negative, pathological, and racist stereotypes of black men that we've been fighting against since the 1960s. Right. So this tells us that there's actually been a very successful socialization of anti-black male stereotypes into the leftist political party, that many of the intersectional feminist arguments that are coming out that have now become mainstream don't see black men as a viable population, right? Are people worth listening to, and that many of the gender wars aren't really about equality, right? Because the arguments that we're having about Breonna Taylor versus George Floyd are not about equality. They're not about let's make sure we're taking in everybody. The argument is who's going to be center stage, who's going to be the body that they see white liberals funding and endorsing. And when you're appealing to white people's money, they're going to pick the black body that they find the least offensive. And we know where black men traditionally fit on that spectrum.
Okay. Talk to us a little bit about the Rolling Stone cover, if you would, and maybe even a certain recent piece on time.com dealing with this whole question of whether or not black men have been given too much attention, Breonna Taylor versus George Floyd. Talk to us a little bit about how we're seeing this show up in the media.
Well, I think I've been pretty adamant that I'm not one to argue about which dead body gets the most attention. The primary concern for black people has to be getting the disproportionate rates of homicide down. Right? This idea that black people die and then we want to talk about which corpse is in the media more is silly to me. And I think that it just shows the debaseness and the simplicity of black politics in this moment. Black men, as I've said before, black men if they have recognition, it does not stop them from being killed. So if the argument is black men receive too much attention and black women need attention, none of the attention that black men receives has decreased any of the numbers of police homicides over the last 5 or 6 years.
Right.
So what are we like? Are we arguing that media attention somehow is solving the problem? Because that seems to be an empirically false claim. If the argument that we're upset because Ms. Taylor was killed and people don't express outrage, well, that seems to be false as well. Because most of the things that I've at least seen over here in Scotland from the United States, looking at Louisville, etc., seems to be very much in support, predominantly about Ms. Breonna Taylor. So I'm not exactly sure what I don't know what the opinion makers in America think should be happening. The reality of the situation is that black men are over 90% of the victims. They're over 90% of the victims of police homicide. They're the majority of the black people incarcerated, right? They report some of the highest and most negative experiences with racism in the United States. If you're not going to primarily center the victim, then what's the calculus that you're actually working under? Because as we've talked about before, when you look at the numbers for domestic violence and sexual abuse, black men are roughly 40 to 50% of those victims. And I've never seen any of these intersectional feminists who are making the claim that black men are taking up all the center space and excluding people, even mention male victims in those aspects. So I'm curious, this isn't a zero-sum game in my mind, but I'm so curious that if this is truly the impetus behind how these people feel, how these activists feel, that we need an inclusive approach for everybody, then why does it say her name report not have anything about black men who are victimized and raped by the police? Does it have anything about black men who are brutalized in domestic violence situations and can't call the police because they'll think they're the perpetrator? See, these issues in our community are much broader than these political, naive articulations that are really based to get white people's attention. The thing that I think that black men have to understand is that there are people in the academy and in the activist community that are trying to pimp off black people's death. And gender wars are extremely profitable to white liberals who are feminists, who are socialists, who align themselves with various organizations that don't believe in strong black solidarity. So you get them picking apart. If they could pick apart the gender issue or the queer issue or the trans issue, and that becomes black people don't really care about you, but us white people, we care about you. These same types of tactics that we had coming out of the 60s and 70s. Right, we literally have Gloria Steinem on tape saying that she was funded by the CIA to bring down radical student movements, and we keep pretending that these kinds of divisive tactics don't have some basis in what was done before. So I think that we have to be very careful about what the conversations are, and if this is really an issue of attention, right? Again, this is the logic that I don't understand. The problem with intersectional visibility, and this is the argument that's being used, is that it says that even though we accept that the direct oppression of subordinate men are the most direct and most lethal forms of violence in a society, it bases everything off of recognition. And because people now value this, right, don't see the disposability of black men in the United States, I fear that there's no recourse. Because if you can't admit, given the numbers, that black men are the primary victims of police homicide in the United States, then there's no basis for political solidarity. And I think this Rolling Stone, magazine cover becomes very, very important. Right? It becomes very, very important because the black male is only centered there as the thought being fought for, right? He's the absence that's being accumulated, but there is no strong leadership. I mean, we talked about this a few years ago when Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Tamir Wright, they brought all the mothers, right? Hillary Clinton brought all the mothers of the deceased black boys and black men on stage, but they made no mention whatsoever of the fathers. There was no platform for activism. You wouldn't even know that many of these boys, even your boys and young men, even had fathers. Given the way the media portrayed it, right? So the representations that we get from the mainstream liberal media still revolve around the idea of father absenteeism in the black community, right? Like these things are not random. The historical narrative that racist white people have been bringing for centuries is that black men are not good fathers, that black men cannot lead and take care of households, that black men are not involved in their children's lives. And then we take moments when black boys are killed and we reify that very same moment because we act like the only people that can speak for dead black men are women.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Rolling Stone cover repeats that kind of racist mythology. And the only reason it's not being called a racist mythology is because you have black women that get a sense of validation from it. But the same way that we would say, oh, look, you know, black men are on the cover of everything and there's no ideas of a successful black woman, look how exclusive that is, right? Look at how that doesn't serve or presence black women and their contributions, which is something I completely agree with, that you should have both. You come up here and you celebrate, right, a Rolling Stone, you know, cover that only has the dead face, the imprint of Mr. George Floyd, and completely absent of black men throughout the picture. They got white people more front and center supporting the black woman and the black child than any image of a black man who are the primary victims of this kind of violence, right? So we need to be careful about the way that we assimilate media and representations, because they actually represent the way that white people view politics. That's their view of the black community, right? That is single black mothers trying to lead these deviant bound black boys out of trouble, and then they fail and they get killed by cops. So this reifies the black matriarch stereotype. And the only thing we've done is we've now read this as positive black feminist politics. But it's the same racist trope of the black matriarch that determines the future of the race that people are fighting against in the 1960s and saying, look, our communities have extended families, black men participate, black men have different relationships with children that aren't based on the narrow standards of white society, but we have very short historical memories.
Okay, absolutely. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to bring BGS up and let him kind of go into his thoughts about this. And I'm just going to keep bringing people in one at a time. And then, you know, hopefully after that, we'll be able to have some dialogue. So let me bring him up into the stream. All right. You there, sir? BGS? Okay. Hope my earphones didn't go out.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
All right. Yeah, I'm honored. This is, like I said, this is just a power grab, and everybody, you know, because of the moment that we're in, because of the COVID, because of the how can I say, the balance of power is shifting in the United States because of what's going on in the economy and across the globe. This is, you know, this is people's moment to actually grab power, and black women or BLM or whoever you want to call them, this is their moment, and this is across the globe. So, like I said, like Littlefinger says in the Game of Thrones, chaos is a ladder, and you have this thing of where frustrated white people that have been locked up for 3 months and they need a cause celeb to get behind it, and George Floyd was just the straw that broke the camel's back, or the match that ignited the flame. And now, you know, this BLM, which I believe is a black political party for black women that actually gain political power with the black female candidates, this is their moment. So, and the funny thing is, in the beginning, they said they weren't going to get behind George Floyd because he had a white woman.
Yeah, I remember that. Yep.
And then, and then they said, well, if let Becky and Karen go fight for you. And then when Becky and Karen actually took the reins, took the leadership, because, you know, they needed a cause to live, then the black women want to come in and then blame it on us. Like this, they call black women the mules of the world. Guess what? We are basically the stepping stool of the world. Black men are. So whatever cause, whatever agenda, they use black men as the stepping stone to get there. And this is nothing new.
Tell me, BGS, what are your thoughts about protest activism itself and black men?
I think protest activism, if you get enough numbers, you get enough people behind it, it will work. you can see that. But it takes a large amount of people. It takes a large amount of momentum. So basically, protest activism is timing. Okay, if you can hit it at the right time, you can get something done. Okay, it's just like a forest fire. Okay, if there's green grass, you can throw matches all day.
Mm.
But if the grass is dry and ready to combust, one match will light up a whole forest. And this is what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So this is for people that are aware. This is the time. This is their time to actually come out. So this is what you're seeing. This is how come there's so much stress, especially on Black men. Okay, the focus is on Black men because, like I said, Black men are still getting killed. Black men are still getting hung. You just had 4 Black men hung within the last week across the country. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
you still have Black men getting shot. Okay, nothing has really changed. Okay, nothing has really changed. All Black men are is a convenient excuse, a convenient rallying point. And this, like I said, this is nothing new. This is absolutely nothing new,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not surprised. So, I predicted this would happen. I predicted that this would come. Because the United States and even the world, because I'm sure this is the same thing in Great Britain, because they're having the same problems. We don't hear about it as much, but they're having the exact same problems with Black people in BLM and the protests of being confined is happening all over the world. UK's having the same doggone problem. The thing is that now the balance of power is starting to shift because your economics are actually on an edge, and COVID has knocked it off balance. They're trying to get this economy back on track, but they can't get the economy back on track until people calm down and actually go back to work and actually go back to doing what they're doing. Okay, and so now your governments are willing to give more. They're willing to give more aid, change laws, whatever they need to do to save this global economic system from collapsing. And everybody knows it. That's how come everybody's rushing in and put their agendas in, whether it's reparations, whether it's Black female leadership, because now now Biden is willing to put a Black female VP on his running board, right? Because they need to calm people down. And they do believe that they do believe that Black women are in charge of the Black community. They do believe in the Black matriarchy. Unfortunately, most Black men have been socialized to follow.
Okay.
But they need Black male bodies out there to actually protest and move this agenda forward. Because the Black men are sitting back and said, okay, the Black women are out there, the white women are out there, where are Black men?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The optics don't look good.
Now, last question. You did a couple of shows recently on the funding of BLM.
Yeah.
Can you give us a brief kind of overview of what you found? And yeah.
I don't know exactly who approached who first, but from my research, BLM was just basically a hashtag. Okay, it was just a group of people that came up with a hashtag that started on Twitter, but all of a sudden, within a year and a half, they get $150 million worth of funding, and this was 2016 from Soros, from the Ford Foundations, from a host of other philanthropy foundations. Okay, in other words, it looks like a Tea Party. Okay, and the Tea Party started right after the banking crisis, and it was actually started by Wall Street traders. Okay, it's supposed to look like a grassroots organization. Okay, but it's not. So the thing is, it's not whether they're doing good or bad work. Okay, sometimes you get what I call astroturf organizations that will do good work. So I'm not arguing whether they're doing good or bad work. I don't necessarily like their platform, but if they're moving the agenda ahead, I have no problem with it. But the thing is, you should at least know who pays them. Okay. Sean King, he used to be part of BLM. He's writing for the New York Post. There's another brother, I can't remember his name. He started after a year later, he started being adjunct at Harvard. Okay. So these are not necessarily grassroots people.
Okay.
And when you start looking at the history of these people and the foundations that they're with and the money behind these particular foundations, it seems to be that, these people were more selected than just somebody just popped up out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
So BLM, I have to give them credit. It's genius, because now Black Lives Matter is a household name around the globe.
Yeah.
So when you think of a Black movement or a Black freedom movement, BLM is in front. So I wouldn't be surprised if you get a lot of ex-BLM people that got their street cred from this movement running for political office.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me bring up Dr. Ronald Neal. Let me see. Into the conversation. Doc, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes. Come on, join in on this. So we're talking about, as you know, we're looking at protest activism. We're talking about how Black men are seen. We're talking about the Rolling Stone cover. We're talking about BLM. But ultimately, we're looking at how Black men are perceived in regard to protest activism, and just what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah. I think that white liberals, white leftists, and Black queer feminists, along with the academy, have been extraordinarily successful over the last 4 decades in erasing the Black political imagination. That is, the Black political tradition with respect to what Black men have contributed to Black politics over the last 100 years. And so when you talk about displacing or recentering or centering women, centering LGBTQ populations, when you talk about moving beyond a certain type of male leadership, what you have done, you have erased a long history of struggle. So think about this. We're having a conversation, or we're talking about dilemmas that could easily be discerned by looking at what we've done in the past. There's never been a consensus with respect to Black people in terms of how we move forward. You can go back to Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. You can look at Martin Luther King Jr. and Thurgood Marshall. You can look at Stokely Carmichael, versus Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You can look at the Black Panther Party versus Black Christian leadership. We have never had a complete consensus about strategy and where we should go. Think about this. Elijah Muhammad spent 3 years in a federal prison for being a draft dodger. Elijah Muhammad made a deliberate decision when he was released from prison and resumed leadership of the Nation of Islam to not engage in protest, to not deal with the state, because he did not want his organization to feel the heat of the federal government. And for this reason, that's why they had a quietist, conservative posture towards Black American life. That's why they focused on a national self-determinative program in terms of uplift. And so when we talk about why Black men are not involved, we talk about why Black men are not behaving like Black women, we do so without thinking about this history that has preceded us. And the queer feminists, the liberals, and the leftists, they have been successful in suffocating any type of discourse with respect to Black men in politics, their place in politics. And as a result, what you have is women who have now been positioned of being the HNICs of Black America. And that's what they are, the HNICs. These struggles about leadership, these struggles about power, is about who calls the shots. It's about who gets to determine who defines reality. And Black women who are out there, Black queer feminists, they have been disingenuous in not being forthright and honest about their desire for power. And I think that's a part of the problem that we're dealing with. The other thing I think that's going on right here is that I think there's too much stock that's placed in the type of protest activity that we're seeing. That is, that what happens is that you have a group of select women who think that protest represents the ultimacy. It is the ultimacy, the standard bearer, the gold standard for Black progress. Okay, and as you go out, you have your placards, you have your bullhorns and what have you, and that becomes the quintessence of what it means to move forward. And for me, I look at protest at a certain level as a minimum standard, a bare minimum. So you think about this: you've got white liberals, you have you have white leftists and all other sorts of white people who get out there, you know, in a reactionary fashion to prove themselves or to relieve themselves of white guilt, and they're not making any real sacrifices. I mean, they're not really giving anything up. Recognition is not a sacrifice. You know, this notion that we're out here in solidarity in a symbolic faction does not require you to divest yourself of whiteness or white supremacy or anything related to it. So it's a minimum standards. So we're not talking about Black women investing themselves in something that would benefit Black men in a long-term fashion. That is something that would require sacrifice. We're not protesting, or Black women are not protesting, and other people are not protesting over, you know, Black men and or Black boys and how they're working and out and how they're not being developed in the school system. We're not marching over Black men who are not being included in the medical profession. We're not marching about Black men who are being excluded from American capitalism. We're talking about Black men who are dead. We're not marching for life. We're marching for death, and that's a minimum standard that doesn't benefit Black men. So I think that these elements that exist in this whole domain have to really be taken account of when we think about this whole conversation about why Black men are not involved or why Black men are not protecting Black women, and this type of, you know, schizophrenic back and forth that we're having to respond to.
Mm-hmm. You know, this whole question of Black men protecting has always been kind of strange to me, because I've never known a time where I haven't seen it. Even in the last few weeks, when the you know, some of the protests, the clashes with the police first started showing up, the first one I saw, I think, was one in New York, and the police and the people were going at it hand to hand, and you could hear Black men screaming out, not the women,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they were getting into physical altercations with the police. But then it got me to thinking, I was like, you know, it doesn't matter how many times I see this, you know what I mean? Even when it is shown in media, the prevailing idea is that it doesn't happen. And you start to notice that if you really get into that fight, you got to start, you know, counting how many times you see Black men present at protests and how many times you see them protecting. And at the end of the day, for many of these people online, it's never enough. Talk to us, Dr. Neal, about this whole question of Black men having to defend whether or not they defend, or whether or not they're even present. Do you see any of this kind of stuff happening?
Yeah, and I think it's a losing proposition, because what happens is that there's nothing that you can ever do to satisfy their need to be psychologically cajoled, affirmed in terms of protection. I mean, it's a waste of time. And also here's the thing. Also, I do think that the whole rhetoric of protectionism is an infantilized rhetoric. Okay, we live in an advanced society. Okay, we live in an advanced technological society. We're not living on an island. We're not somewhere off in the middle of the Caribbean. We're not talking about being in a village, you know, where Black men are having to protect women from conquerors, from other villages and what have you. We're living in a complex reality. Okay, and so the whole rhetoric of protection is simplistic. It is juvenile, and it is childish. Understand? And so I think that we waste a lot of time by continually addressing this simplistic idea of what it means to move forward. And I think also what it does is it really says a lot about how unsophisticated we are politically. Again, I think that these ideologies, these intersectional ideologies, these liberal ideologies, what's going on in the media rather, has totally damaged our imagination. We cannot think in a very robust and sophisticated way about Black people. We don't have to understand our political history. We don't have to understand the economic circumstances that we're in. We don't have to understand the way in which the Black male population has been decimated over the last 5 decades. And that's one of the biggest problems. We have a juvenile, a childish understanding of the Black male situation. And because of that, we continue to be confronted with this infantilized demand that Black men protect. And when Black men do protect in those instances, those instances are never enough.
Real quick, we got about 558 watching right now. Please make sure you hit the like button if you're on YouTube, share and subscribe. If you haven't subscribed yet, definitely make sure you do. If you're on Facebook, please go ahead and share. It should be public, should be accessible. For some reason, I always post it publicly, and then for some reason, the comments limited to friends. I don't mean to do that. So if that happens again, just let me know. I have no problem opening it up. But Dr. Curry, go in on this a little bit and tell us your thoughts in regard to what Dr. Neal was just dealing with.
No, I think Dr. Neal is exactly right. But I mean, this idea of need to be protected is part of the upshot of white patriarchy, right? Like one of the things that makes patriarchy different than say racism is that patriarchy actually tries to protect white women from disposability. Right? Racism, anti-Black racism, has always been a genocidal logic. It's always tried to dispose of the people that it takes to be its targets of violence. So what? And this is the contradiction. This is what I mean by the narrowness. And I think that Dr. Neal articulates quite well is that we put ourselves in a position to say that our major ethos is that we're against patriarchy. We don't want any more patriarchal domination. And then you call Black men weak precisely to the extent that they can't protect you like white patriarchs protect white women. So the idea here is that you have Black women claiming that they don't want sexist oppression, but then getting mad because their arguments basically treat me like a white woman. And it's this kind of paradoxical contradiction that is constantly put on Black men in American politics. That because Black men are weak men and they can't protect Black women from the kind of violence encroached by the state, and somehow Black men are not really men, right? And this is the dangerous ideology. So who then? And this is what's interesting. Who then becomes the male? So once you eliminate Black men, you've put them in prison. You've empowered them. You said that they can't work. Who then becomes the patriarch? Well, of course, the appeal to the state, right? So the state, the white liberals, the benefactors, right? The people, well, I should say the funders who take on the Black community as benefactors, right, get to determine our worth. And somehow, and this is the most damning part, somehow we've entered a realm of politics where Black liberals, Black intersectional feminists, etc., believe that the rule of law and the state are better secured and providers of their own future and safety than the Black men in their own community. And this is why you get the idea that Black men are dangerous, and why you even have some feminists arguing that you should not defund or abolish the police because you need the police to protect you from Black men. And it's this kind of racist trope that's being funded, that's being supported, is getting book deals, that overwhelmingly Black public intellectuals and Black public celebrities are endorsing, right? It's about recriminalizing the Black male, taking him out of the political spectrum, and then negotiating with white liberals, white feminists, and white leftists about what to do since there is no men in the Black race. And that's how we're getting this language about the need for protection. It's extremely dangerous, and it puts our politics right back in line with the carceral and violent logics that we were trying to escape decades ago.
Absolutely. Real quick, let me shout out Victor, Ricardo, Brother Truth Be Told, Michael, Wolf, BG Onyx, and Eric, as well as Jaman. Want to appreciate the support for the show. Let me go ahead and bring up the one and only Valdez and see if he can jump in on this conversation. We're dealing with protest activism. We're dealing with the perceptions of Black men, and we're particularly dealing with it now from the Sith Temple itself. Can you hear me, Valdez?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah. Go ahead and jump in on this, man.
What's going on, fellas? The first thing that has to be addressed is the greater society, or what you would call white society or white supremacy or whatever. They've done a very good job of placing Black men in a paradox. And the paradox that we find ourselves in is they have been using Black women for a very long time to keep us in a state of powerlessness. And because of that, we find ourselves in this paradox where you want to have the unity of the black man and the black woman. So if you go against something that black women are saying, or you say something contrary to what they're saying, or you give pushback to whatever agenda they have, then you're going to be put in the category of being the type of black man who doesn't support the women of your group. And then you're going to be vilified for that. However, if you don't address what black women are saying and how they're going about things, then you can never really fix any of the problems that are plaguing the community, because that's what they're doing. What they're doing is they're using black women to continuously push certain narratives. Mm-hmm. And they have no problem with giving, I talk about this all the time, the reason why any society has the ability to have power over a group of people, because I noticed the brother just said something about we've never had a consensus in the black community, which is true. But the black community has never had any leaders that had the ability to reward and punish. Mm. So if you live in this society as a white person, through your whiteness, you can be rewarded by operating under the guise of what whiteness is. And if you don't operate under the guise of that, you can be punished for it. Mm. Now, with black people, we can't operate in a consensus, because there's no punishment if you go against it, and there's no reward if you do what you're supposed to do. Mm. Now, for black women, there is. For black women, if they go along with the liberal Democrats, if they go along with feminist agendas or whatever, there's some sort of reward in there for them. They'll give them some sort of reward, and they'll also punish if need be. But if you look at black men as far as the protests and stuff, and you talk about the absence of black men, I find that interesting, because they're saying this, but you see black men out there.
Right.
You just don't see them in the forefront. You don't see them being handed the mic, because we're never handed the mic. Mm. We're always in this position of the woman being put in the forefront. You look at Black Lives Matter. If you go to their website and look at their mission statement, it doesn't even include black men. Mm-hmm. Doesn't even include black men. And what BGS said is true. They're an organization that is put in place for one purpose and one purpose only, which is to continuously push this agenda against black men, but while simultaneously using black men as the foundation of it, which is completely ridiculous. Now, if you look at black men are being used like Helen of Troy. Mm. If you remember Helen of Troy, she supposedly went with Paris or whatever, and I forgot her husband's name, but he went to Agamemnon. He went to his brother saying, "Will you go to war with me?" Because he was hurt. His feelings was hurt behind his wife leaving him. But Agamemnon, he didn't care about that. He just wanted the excuse to go to war. He just needed the excuse to go to war. So with black men in our deaths is being used as the excuse to do certain things. Now, right now, in my personal opinion, I believe that everything that's going on right now is being used as a way for the Democratic Party to finally beat Trump. Okay. In my opinion, like if you look at what happened with George Floyd, right? You look at what happened with George Floyd. That was something that was a little bit different than a lot of the other situations, the unfortunate situations with black men. Here's a situation where you have a cop who you can tell in the video is purposely trying to kill this brother, purposely trying to do it in a very nonchalant way. So it was a shocker for people, because even though we know this is what cops do, it's very rare that you're going to get to see it up close and personal. Right. So you have a lot of people that were traumatized just by watching that. And so you have these people coming out in force, protesting or whatever. But then all of a sudden, as the protests happen, and I'm going to just keep it real with y'all, when I saw the amount of protest, I started to give it the side eye. And the reason why I started to give it the side eye is because, let's be honest, they've never cared. No one has ever cared about black men. They've been killing black men since the founding of this country, and they're still killing black men. So when I saw that happen, and I start to see certain things happen, I start to see pallets of bricks being put on street sidewalks. You know, a whole new pallet of bricks that still got the shrink wrap around it. When I see Antifa coming out, when I see Black Lives Matter coming out, I say, okay, I see what this is. Because right now, the climate of what's going on in our society is Black men are tired. They're tired. They are sick and tired of the same agenda going on. They're sick and tired of Black women speaking for them, while simultaneously being a tool of white supremacy to oppress us, kill us, and keep us in a powerless situation. Now, when Black men see this, all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, what do I do? You now have Black men leaning more towards being Republicans because they're tired of the Democrats and they don't really have anywhere else to go. Now, if you look at the election back in 2016, you had Hillary Clinton, who supposedly was supposed to win, but she didn't. And now you have people saying, well, the Black people didn't come out and vote. Black voters didn't come out and vote. So it's like, okay, Black voters aren't voting. Why is that? Why wouldn't they vote for Hillary Clinton? They voted for Bill Clinton. They voted for Barack Obama. Why wouldn't they vote for her? So they see this trend happening, and it's like, okay, well, how can we get the Black vote back to the Democratic Party? Well, now all of a sudden you got this situation. You have like a perfect storm going on right now. You have the COVID situation happening. You have all of these protests happen, and you have them adding fuel to the fire of the protests so that they can say, okay, you know what? The Democratic Party can come out. I mean, come on, you had Nancy Pelosi in a kente cloth, man. So they come out and they say, okay, you know what? You're right. We finally realize that the senseless deaths of Black men is ridiculous. You're completely right. So what we're going to do is we're going to prosecute these cops. We're going to pass some new legislation. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. But most people don't even realize the cops that they're charging, they're not even going to have a grand jury for those police officers until probably after the election. So I'm still waiting to see what's going to happen with the results of this. Is this going to be a lasting change? Is this going to be something that actually changes the landscape of America? Or is this just more political theater? For the purpose of trying to galvanize the Black vote so that they can finally beat Donald Trump, who has been promising, white people, a better America, which is why they're coming out to vote for him. And you've got Black men coming out and voting for him just for the simple fact that they don't want Hillary in there, and they don't want Biden in there, two people that are tied to that 1994 crime bill that has contributed to the mass incarceration of Black men. So it's like Black men are stuck between a rock and a hard place. And they're just tired. They're just trying to figure out how to navigate this. They're tired of Black women tearing them down. They're tired of Black men are smart. We're smart enough to see that the greater society is using our own woman against us. We're smart enough to see it, but at the same time, Black men are hurt because they're trying to figure out why would these women allow the greater society to use them against us in such a negative way.
Appreciate that. Dropping it as usual. Let me bring in another fellow content creator into the discussion. Right now, we got 631 watching between YouTube and Facebook. Please get the likes up, share, and subscribe. We got a cross section of brothers that I don't know if YouTube has really ever seen before. We got brothers that are coming from all kind of different backgrounds, all kind of different trainings, some self-educated, some with doctorates, some coming through with content as content creators, some who make their appearances very occasionally. But this cross section of Black men is actually quite diverse, despite that others may say that it isn't diverse unless it meets whatever particular agenda is popular, every 15 minutes or so. But this is actually a very diverse panel, and I'm grateful to each of these brothers for coming out and dropping their opinion on this. And most particularly, I want you guys to support everybody up here, but also the content creators. Make sure you watch, you support, you contribute to everybody's channel. Right now, we just pulled up the G with the Ph.D. Why don't you break us off a little bit on your thoughts on protest activism, Black men, the Rolling Stone cover, BLM, whatever you want to jump in on, bro.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
What's good, everybody on the panel and everybody out there? My opinion on Black men and protest is that what kind of protest are you talking about?
Mm-hmm.
You have to make some sort of discerning identification about what kind of protest you're talking about. Because, like, say for example, my viewpoint is that Ferguson recently is the kind of ground zero of all of what you're beginning to see right now. The birth of Black Lives Matter, the birth of this kind of politics where Black women are coming into the fore, making demands upon the Democratic Party to be more visible, and to become more seen. But while that's occurring, right, it's over the lives of Black men. And I can guarantee you, in a place like Ferguson, Missouri, where all of this started, it was Black men out there initially that did all of the work, like burning the Quick Trip down, burning AutoZone down. And it wasn't something that was manufactured by Antifa. All these other interlopers, all these other different groups with their own agendas weren't out there because they didn't actually have time to get the playbook together, because it was something that happened. It's like a play in sports where you don't know that the flea flicker is about to happen, but it happens, right? Mm-hmm. So you got people like Darren Seals out there who's just overlooked, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you mean Black men aren't there? Yeah, Black men have been there. I'm talking about people like, Marshawn McCarroll, who are out there. I'm talking about people like DeAndre Joshua out there. People like Danye Jones out there. But all of a sudden, they're not even perceived as people who actually were protesting. These were the original protesters. But see, this is when men retreat, is when the theatrics begin, because they don't have any time for it. And when the theatrics begin, it's all centered around the playbook of visibility, or the playbook of Black feminism recently, which basically says, okay, well, Black men have always been leaders. And when they lead, they've been patriarchal and they've marginalized women and queer folk. So now it's time for the people who've been decentered to now be centered. But what's in the context of all of that, you're not paying attention to the very people who are actually initiating all of the incidences in which the cameras are brought in. Because it's one thing to be out there burning stuff down and tearing stuff up, and then for all of that to transpire, and then a group of people to come along who do activism on a daily basis to come in and do die-ins and have placards and march peacefully, right? It's two different types of energies, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, you're going to select the energy that's more palatable to you if you're on the camera. I mean, if you got the cameras, if you got the staging, who are you going to select, right? The wild, uncouth youth who doesn't have a managed or a polished, countenance to give you for the camera, who's going to give it to you raw and give it to you unfettered in terms of expression, or you're going to listen to this nice, educated Black lady who's been educated at some sort of institution of higher learning, and she already has a playbook that most of the people in this culture have already been accepting of. Mm-hmm. The point is that Black men are being marginalized in the very movement that's supposed to give them voice. Mm-hmm. And not only do I hold Black women responsible for this, the feminist Black women who consider themselves to be radicals, right? I also hold the press responsible for this. Like, that this is a phenomenon that's impacting Black men more predominantly than any other demographic, but you don't call on Black men to have anything to say about it. Mm-hmm. It's their fault also, right? And then when we try to say something, you get a group of Black women who say, well, you're being patriarchal for beginning to even talk to begin with. It's insidious. They got us in a trap. It's a catch-22. You can't win. Mm-hmm. I mean, I agree with what Valdez says, and all of us, the people who've spoken thus far, you can't say anything without being unjust to begin with. As soon as you speak, you have engaged in an unjust act. So you're in a catch-22. You cannot win. But the only way I think that it's going to end is if black men just say, we're tired of caring about your feelings. Your feelings don't matter anymore, because our deaths matter more than your feelings, your desire to be the center of attention, which quite frankly, I find borderline narcissistic. You know, it's like, come on, man, we're out here dying. Our communities are languishing. You know that we're not moving forward progressively in terms of being able to accumulate wealth as a group of people or a demographic in this society. What more do you want, right? Are you willing to cut your nose off to spite your face in order to be seen? At some point, we have to make some real choices and decisions here. Like, who's the wheat and who's the chaff? Who's really the gunfire or the gunpowder for the bullets, and who's the milquetoast? Because at the current moment, all I'm seeing is milquetoast, 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 and people getting money and dollars, and it's not going to the very demographic who needs it, right? People are being erased in this culture. And it's the poor folks, poor women. You know what I'm saying? Women who don't have a whole lot to make, ends meet with. They're not being, brought to the fore in this conversation. It's these women who already have all that they need to get by, and they're gaining more and more and more as time ticks, and they're not speaking to the youth. We need grassroots is what we need. BLM ain't it, man. So, I'm just trying to keep it as real as I possibly can. I can use, graduated terminology in order to, articulate my feelings. But there's a certain level of ire I have for all of this, because I'm from St. Louis and I saw it all unfold. And then I'm thinking to myself, how is it possible for a group of men to be erased primarily because they're heterosexual men, primarily because we got a problem with homophobia in our community, which to me, I don't think is as big as a problem as they're making it out to be, especially now that all of these laws have been passed, and that all of the media has kind of endorsed the very acceptability of these kind of relationships and the kind of openness, that comes along with just accepting and seeing it over and over and over again. It's cultural hegemony, really. So it's already out there. People already accept you. But what we don't accept is a bunch of people from a different class. And class politics is not really actually being mentioned here. People from a different class who exist outside of these communities, who come in after the natives drum up and foment trouble. Now they get to come in and, for the white people, make sense of it all, like there's some sort of sportscaster giving a play-by-play, depiction of what happened or transpired on the gridiron. No, man. At some point, somebody's got to talk to the people on the ground, right? So that's my thoughts about it, and I'm just upset, man. I'm upset at being marginalized as a man and not being able to speak on these issues. That's it.
Okay. Let me see here. Let me bring up. I'm gonna have to. I can only have 6 on the screen at a time, so I'm still learning how to manage this a little bit. I'm not quite as savvy as some of the brothers who've been doing this for a while, but I'm gonna take a couple of people down, and I'm gonna bring up our last 2 who are joining the panel, and then we'll kind of rotate in. Brothers, make sure you use the private chat. Let me know if there's something you want to communicate. But let me bring in Artisan real quick, and I'm gonna take. Let me see. Dr. Neal, I'm gonna take you down for a minute. I'm gonna bring you back up in a little bit, as well as GG. So let me get the last 2 in real quick. But don't dial out. So hold on. Okay. All right, brother Artisan.
What's up, brothers? Honored to be here.
Artisan. Now, let me first say, Artisan was kind enough to rearrange his schedule to a great extent to be here, and I appreciate that. When I was first thinking about doing this particular show, literally in the middle of conversation with Dr. Neal about it, Artisan put up a video as we were talking about activism, and I was like, damn it, man, let me get this brother in here. So he was kind enough to join us despite his schedule, and I appreciate that. Holler at us a little bit about your thoughts on what we're talking about, man.
Well, I like all the points the brothers have been making. so far. I've said my position on this protesting thing. I don't believe that protesting actually works unless it has some teeth in it, unless it's really going to go after these people who are committing these atrocities and actually hold them accountable, not just for an election cycle, but for, actual justice for the people who have been slain and seeing this stuff stopped. If it doesn't accomplish that, then the protesting is pointless. But I would say this current event of this protest, it was really interesting to see how this whole thing really shifted from being a righteous protest to being somebody's platform for stumping for a candidate or a political party or the next agenda du jour. I mean, that was the most sickening part about it, because it showed, I mean, shit, the last 8 months, 10 months, we've been seeing this over and over again, how much that the media and this culture really does not like black men and will take any opportunity to step on their head and prop themselves up and say, look at me, and forget about him at any opportunity. You saw it with the Kobe stuff, you saw it with the Snoop stuff, and then you see it with these other deaths and stuff like that. These people do not really care. And that's the part that really gets to me, because I'm a Gen Xer. I've grown up in this shit. Angryman was talking about it earlier, about black men being in the trick bag. And I was saying, we were born into the trick bag. Our whole fight is not being in it, it's trying to get out of the damn thing, because it was wrapped up on us, like a blanket the minute we came into this world. So all our awakenings and all our knowledge is trying to get out of it and seeing the veil, pulling back the veil and seeing behind the scenes of all this stuff, and trying to tell other brothers, like, look, you gotta be out of this situation. These people do not care about you. The protests are righteous. The people that come in after the fact, the celebrity protesters, that's all I see them as. This is a reality show for them, another political platform, another fundraiser for them to, cut their teeth and say, like they did back in the civil rights era, oh, I marched with Malcolm, I marched with Martin Luther King. That's all they're doing. I was there on the ground. No, you weren't. I'm seeing these protests in Oakland. I don't see these people anywhere. And they say they live in Oakland. All I'm seeing is Asians, Latinos, white folks all over the place, spraying Black Lives Matter, making murals about black folks and stuff like that. I see very few black sisters out there unless they taking a selfie next to one of these murals and acting like they doing some shit. So what I do see is a lot of black men out there involved. But the funniest part that I see is that these same people who will go to these protests are the same ones passing me on the street, turning the side eye and turning up their face. It's like, you know what this protest is about, right? I'm a black man, and you still expressing this kind of, same racist sentiment that we're saying that is responsible for these brothers being killed. The same kind of, degradation of spirit and of character, and just, disposable man in a sense. You're displaying that now while you're headed to a freaking protest talking about Black Lives Matter. Get the hell out of here. It doesn't matter to you. It's just an opportunity for some people to promote themselves or say they did something, when at the end of the day, and I hate saying that term, they're not actually doing anything. They just want to feel good, and they're engaging in the feel goodery of it for some extent.
So it becomes like a status symbol to say you were there and take
exactly.
Okay. Let me see. Hood Scholar, drop in a little bit. What's up?
Yo, first, y'all, if y'all don't know, today is my birthday. So this is like a birthday present. What's up, brothers? How y'all feeling?
Happy birthday.
Hey, man.
Thank you. Yo, so yeah, I was like, man, since I'm the last to go, I'm like, what else can I say? But I do want to start with this, because so let me preface my comments with two things. One, I believe our primary enemy is white supremacy, and two, I was actually out there on the front lines protesting. So let me build on what the Green Gorilla has said, right? And with this class thing that's being left out, not of our conversation, but the broader conversation. Being out there, right? So one, what they tried to do, and let me tell y'all why this whole notion of looting and rioting got so much attention, why this is such a problem. Because what they tried to do was create this dichotomy between peaceful protester and rioting / looting. And by doing that, right, they can say, look, this is the way you protest the right way. But now let's draw this whole narrative together, right? Who was doing the peaceful protesting and who was doing the rioting and looting? Now, those who were involved in the rioting and looting were who? A lot of black men, right? It was black men who was tearing stuff up, who was stuff up. Y'all can read between the lines, right? It was black men. And because I was out there, look, it was actually a lot of black men and a lot of basically like hood dudes, people from the hood, right? And this is what Green Gorilla was talking about, right? So I can tell y'all what you all see on the camera. This is why I say it goes back to white supremacy. What you all see, what's being put on the camera, even what makes it to social media, is curated by the white media. So for those who follow me, you can see that I try to offer a different picture, but I can tell you the places where I was at, there were no cameras, right? So if there's no cameras, there's literally all this activity going on that unless you're there, you have no idea that this is happening. And where I was, there were a lot of both black men and black women. And another thing y'all wouldn't know is, right, so this one story, and I'm going to try not to get, thanks for the birthday wishes, y'all. I'm going to try not to get too long-winded with the stories, right? But one time, right, so a couple of times when I was out there, they shot us with tear gas and rubber bullets, right? So it was a group of us. We got shot. The police came in on us. They shot us with rubber bullets. Guess who ran first? This white couple. See, that's the thing. The news isn't going. Y'all not going to see that in the news. I saw this white couple. It was like, look, I'm not down for this. I'm out, deuces. But you know who was primarily there? All us hood folks, right? All those people, and none of this is on the news. So all the hood folks, both black men and women, majority of black people who was out there dealing with the police, right? So then the next day, was protesting, and this is the ironic part, right? Was peacefully protesting. They like corner us in, they tear gas all of us. So this is y'all, like, I'm with Green Gorilla, like I'm pissed off, right? Because I'm reading narratives of black men not protesting, and I got tear gas, shot with rubber bullets, and arrested. How y'all think I feel, right? Reading BS like that black men aren't doing this when I got hit by rubber bullets, and my throat still hurts today because I breathe in this tear gas, right? So yeah, it's real. So let me tell y'all this story, right? After the police, they had like 200, 300 cops out there from all over the state. And for people who don't know, I went to Minneapolis, so I was in Minneapolis on the front lines, right? They did all that. They got us all down. There was one tall black man. He wasn't doing anything wrong. Literally just standing there talking to somebody. Next thing we know, boom, boom, boom. They shot him rubber bullets. He dropped right beside me. And then y'all would say some BS like black men aren't protecting people in black. So on the ground, right? So let me bring this all together. So let me show you how this narrative works. If you can create this dichotomy between the peaceful protesters and rioting and looting, right? Which we know that's a problem. And we know the real change actually came from what? The buildings being burned down. Real change came from what? Glasses being broken. The actual violence. Because we haven't seen any, throughout the history, right? We haven't seen any revolutionary change without violence. So those who actually did the violence, that's what led to, now we got to lock up the police officers. Now we got to do something to implement this. We need to celebrate Juneteenth as a holiday, right? It wasn't a peaceful protest. But if y'all can see how this narrative worked, the peaceful protest was center and highlight and view particular groups of people. And we all know who those are, right? What they would not show, right? And if you can say peaceful protesting is the way to protest, then you can elevate a specific form of protest, elevate a specific group of people while demonizing and devaluing those who are actually hurting and suffering the most. So those who were doing the quote unquote rioting and looting, which is wrong, we can say those who played their role in the uprising were those that Green Gorilla was talking about before, those like Darren Seals, right? Those like myself, those other people who are both black men and women who said, look, enough is enough. because at the same time, these are the ones who were suffering the most. Like this one dude talked about how he was homeless and he was poor. A young black dude, 21 years old, talking about being poor and homeless and struggling with life. And these are the stories that people don't hear. And these are the ones who are uprising during the revolution. And these are the ones who are being left out of the narrative. Because if you include them in the narrative, they need to include both black men, black women from the hood working together, fighting for the revolution.
All right. All right. First, I want to again thank everybody for joining the panel. I want to shout out a few people real quick. Brain Trust, appreciate you sharing the show. Bishop Red Pill, Valdez, appreciate y'all putting the word out, sharing the show, as well as Underrated Darkness. Appreciate that. Again, we got 671 watching. Please share, subscribe, support the show. Let me see. So we got everybody in. I want to deal real quick with this whole kind of online, especially social media kind of thing where we're seeing all of these so-called women coming in and talking about, black men arguing about really nothing, but really with these derogatory kind of statements about black men as a whole. Talk to us about, and I'm just putting this out to the group. Let me see. I'm going to see if I can get, I think Dr. Curry might have stepped away real quick. I wanted to get him to drop a word before he has to go. Because again, he's 8 hours ahead, which is one of the reasons we're doing this show at this time. But talk to us, fellas, about what you may have seen and what your thoughts are about how real a lot of this is in terms of the kind of things we're hearing in social media about black men in regard to black women online. And I'm just going to open it up to the panel.
Let me say something real quick, and then y'all can jump in. I think a lot of it is a performance. And what I mean by that, right, if you notice, if certain people start saying certain things, right, and then it picks up steam, then people can jump on and say, oh, yeah, I feel that way too. So, for example, and that's the other thing, right? So I know some of these people offline. So I saw this one young woman say, I don't feel protected by black men. But then she has a whole entire fiance. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, hold on. Like, so what is it? Do you need to blink twice because you are concerned that your fiance is going to harm you? Or are you actually in a good loving relationship with your fiance, but you got to put add on to this narrative?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think it's just a narrative. All it is a narrative. It's a talking point that they've been using, and they've been feeding that. The feminists have been feeding that to black women. And what black women don't do, they don't read, they don't study, they don't research. They just repeat like little parrots what the last black woman has said. So there is no logical thought or logical thought process behind that. And you got to remember, with women don't think, man. Women are not logic. Women are just feel. So when they said, I don't feel protected, that doesn't mean that they're not.
Well, the thing about it with the whole protection piece, I agree with Dr. Neal on it. And I've said it myself on a live stream, like to say that for any woman in America to say that they don't feel protected is the most ridiculous statement on God's green earth, especially black women, because they can dial 911 within seconds and have any brother locked up for raising the tone of his voice. Mm-hmm. So to say that, they're not protected, that's absolutely ridiculous. We live in a country where women, for the most part, can walk around at night and not, depending on what neighborhood they're in, not really worry about somebody doing something. There's some places in the world that a woman can't come out at all at night because something is most certainly going to happen. But here in America, let's face it, we have a police state here in America. You got police patrolling. You got 911 at your disposal. Shoot, now you ain't even got to unlock your phone to call the police. So, to say that just goes back to this same narrative, like, and it really bothers me. And I really want the opinion of you brothers that come from academia, specifically Dr. Curry, that's something I noticed that frustrates me to no end, is the fact that I constantly hear Black women repeating talking points that were used back in the day to make Black men look a certain way, like the Black men not being good fathers, Black men being brutes, Black men being all of these negative derogatory things that was a part of like Jim Crow propaganda, where they made it look like Black men were this and that. And I'm like, why are our Black women, why are the women in our race repeating these things?
Well, I think you have to understand that every oppressed people takes on some of the ideological remnants of their oppressor, right? And that's what I meant when you look at Black women's responses. I don't think that women are all feels. I live in a house with 3 women, so I know it gets that way sometimes. But I don't think that the main way that Black women have operated within our race has been based on feelings and irrationally. I think that they've made certain decisions that have been based on protecting what they saw the most immediate goal was, which was the progeny of their children and the communities to the best of their ability. And again, this is the same thing that Black men did. What we're looking at is debates and arguments between Black men and women in a situation where every form of sociality and freedom has been taken from them, right? And that's what's so important. When I study other groups of people, like when you talk about Holocaust study scholars, one of the first things they do is they say that what happened during the Holocaust does not determine what our people are actually like. That when people are struggling for survival, they think they could die at any moment, that's not the basis by which we're going to form what Jewish masculinity, femininity, or Jewishness is actually about. But you want to know the difference about how we study Black people in America is that you put Black people, especially Black men, in the most depraved and wretched situations of practically any group in the world, and somehow we rationalize that as their fundamental nature, right? That's the problem. What the ideas that Black women are taking up, and it's not all Black women. Most of this is coming from bourgeois Black feminists and Black liberals. True. But so we have to be very specific, right? We don't have to make the criticisms and interventions we want to make about Black men. We don't have to repeat the generalizations that I think Black feminists unduly make on us. So what the poor Black women are not in line with the ideological tenor of this moment, because they're being excluded from the system as well. Now they may have other issues that we have to talk about, right? Like different disproportionate amounts of violence, etc. But that's their issue is not this playbook. The problem is that you have a group of Black women who are under the rubric of intersectional feminists who have alliances with white liberals that are repeating the kind of racist ideology, like subculture violence theory, the weak man thesis that white liberals put into the world in the 1970s and 80s. And this is the major tenor, but this is not surprising because when we go back in history, we know that white feminists were influenced by these criminological theories about Black men being weak, by Black men not being men, by Black men being deviant, and ultimately by Black men being racist. So given the involvement that white feminists have had with the intellectual and economic sustenance and foundation of Black feminism in the United States, it's not surprising that they share some of these ideas. But most importantly, I think we have to understand that in a world where Black people are dehumanized, a program that tries to offer some form of recognition, right, is attractive. Right, the ideas that we're dealing with right now is the same kind of accusation that feminists made, white feminists, by the way, made of Black men in the 1970s. Their idea was, hey, if Black men are being beat down, they're going to jump and take the first hand out by white men to recognize their humanity. But the last 40 years have proved a different dynamic, that Black women who are educated, that identify with certain feminist ideologies, that identify as being middle class, are willing to throw poor Black people, be they male or female, under the bus in a heartbeat, because these people are fundamentally capitalist.
Say that again, Dr. Tommy. Say that again. Say that again, Dr. Tommy.
They're not grounded in the reality of their people. I think Black men, because we haven't had the opportunity to mobilize up the ranks the same way, right? We haven't been able to economically move like other people, like other groups have. then we're still stuck in our communities. That's why we're tied to the issue. We're tied to the economic issue. We're tied to the kind of exploitation, and we're fundamentally the victims of death. So our view is fundamentally more pessimistic than some other groups. But what white liberals are doing, and this is so important for our women to understand, is that they're feeding them a false narrative of redeeming Black womanhood at the expense of every other group. And it's not just men. We haven't even talked about the kind of violence that Black children experience in this war. Mm-hmm. Right? You know, and my colleague, Dr. Stacey Patton, is always talking about, well, what about the child? So and this is the same thing that Sylvia Winter was saying, that the problem she had with Black feminism is she says, well, once you talk about the Black feminist, what happens to the Black woman, the Black man, and the Black child? And what we've done is we've lost all political analysis. We've lost the ability to think deeply about a situation, and we substituted it with the types of things that white people give us. So if you want a job in the academy, you go in with no publications, start talking about how oppressive Black men are, and white liberals love you. But you could be a Black man that comes in talking about these issues of Black men, talking about how they're being killed by the state, talking about how they're being incarcerated, and no one sees value in that scholarship precisely because the world doesn't see any value in Black male life. And I think the project that we're engaged in is a reconstruction of Black male life, showing what we're getting wrong, showing the conversations that Black men haven't been able to have over the last 3 and 4 decades, both popularly and in the academy. And that's a redemptive and positive project. We don't have to contribute to the wars, the gender wars, because that's going to go on. That white people are designing that. But we have a voice now to say, listen, why is it that a movement that's supposed to be about Black men and boys dying, being funded by white people who don't care about Black men and boys dying? Right? These are the kinds of questions that we have to re-educate our community in. We have to re-socialize Black people to understand that there is a worth in Black men and boys that doesn't have to only be represented by the corpse. Right now, our politics is solely revolving around the corpse of Black men and boys. We're not caring about their lives, their economic condition, their employment, their labor force participation, their life expectancy, education. These are not issues that have been brought up one single time in any of these marches or demonstrations about Black males. But we will march about their corpse. And it's our responsibility to shift that frame, to get Black people thinking about what does it mean to actually have a vibrant notion of Black men and boys so that they can contribute to our communities just like Black women and girls. Because Black women have had to deal with the extermination and genocidal processes that have removed this. And some of them have chose to align themselves with power, and some of them haven't. But in any group, some people choose to align themselves with power, and some people haven't. The situation that we're in isn't unique, but we have a different responsibility in trying to solve it.
Let me get in a question real quick, because again, you know, Dr. Curry is 8 hours ahead. I know his daughters, his wife are over there looking at him like so, but let me get this question in, because one of the things that I've been seeing in the last few weeks is this question of Black men killing Black women in large numbers, that somehow were the greatest killers. You know, I've even seen Twitter posts, you know, from, you know, Black women that are saying things like, well, we have to fight against the system and Black men. They oppress us in our own community. Now, I'm going to say, I think some of these people are, you know, particularly, and I've seen this happen, they're brainwashed in a particular way, especially in regard to women and gender studies. But I also think that some of this stuff is coming from these shill social media accounts and misrepresenting it. Because how hard is it really to throw up a picture of a Black woman, give yourself a fake name, and start espousing whatever you want? And I said this earlier, I've been seeing this from a lot of different accounts where they have no friends, they have no significant numbers, but they're shooting out the most vile statements. And I have seen instances where I've heard those statements coming from people that I know to be, you know, people with these accounts, but there seems to be a mix. But Dr. Curry, if you would clarify for us, what are the actual numbers around intimate partner homicide? How bad is it? Are Black men mass murderers? Break that down for us real quick.
I just don't know what people mean when they say that, right? There was a young woman who tried to engage me on Twitter, and she was just making up numbers. Like, look, every year the government posts a violence against women report, you know, and then you can easily see what the projections are, the estimates for the homicides, both by domestic violence and generally, are in the Black community. Generally, these numbers for intimate partner homicide are roughly around 200. I think the highest number I ever saw was like 270 or 290. And in general, you're looking at under 500 deaths from Black women. This isn't that far outside the range because in a given year, the FBI records roughly 900 to 1,000. I think last year was a little higher, maybe 1,100 homicides, right, for Black women in the United States. Now you compare that with Black men. Black men are usually 6,000 to 7,000. I think one year was almost 8,000 homicide deaths in the United States. So I don't know what they're trying to ask, right? Because in any given situation, men kill other men. That's just the rule of homicide. Men are more likely to kill other men who are strangers than they are to kill women. Women are more likely to kill people that are intimate, have intimate relations with them. Usually family members or close acquaintances. Now, are the numbers the same? Absolutely not. If you're talking about intimate partner homicide and not general murder, the UCR documents roughly, like I said, around 250 to 290 Black men killing Black women. But in that same year, you'll have Black men about a third of intimate partner homicide victims, roughly between 150 maybe to 180. It just depends. These things change year to year, and they vary with economic cycle. But I think is the problem is that somehow that's being made as an argument for while the other 12.3 or 4 million Black adult men in this country don't deserve to be marched for. So if you have 200 people or 300 people, hell, if you have 500 people that do something out of 12.3 or 4 million people, I don't know what that means, that says about the race. That's like me looking at the numbers of Black women who abuse or kill children or kill spouses and saying that all Black women are X. The problem is that there's something about Black men. There's a negativity about anti-Black misandry that grounds these stereotypes. Most Black men are positive, hardworking, productive citizens, but we're the only group that's evaluated by the 0.5% of our group. And this is what I mean when I say that there has to be something serious about how we're engaging and trying to scientifically ground the study of Black men and boys in the United States. We can't keep defining Black men by the most wretched of their race, right, or of their group. And notice, this is the same argument that Du Bois was making about how white races were evaluating the Negro race. He says that you don't look at the millions of Black people who form the majority of the race. You point to the worst or to the most deviant and use that as the basis. So what we're dealing with, again, a kind of gender ideology that says that we don't have to look at Black men as a whole, but we can look at Black men at the extremes, and that forms the basis of the character of the whole. But we're completely silent on the way that violence actually operates in our community. Black women in these same conditions, segregated, violent, and poor communities, participate in violence, child abuse, physical and spousal abuse, in some cases murder. And sure, those numbers are less than Black men, but that's not a character indictment about the women in the communities. It's a comment on the actual communities where you see that any group of people, be they Black, white, Asian, etc., deal with the same kind of problem if they don't have resources. So we need to be real honest here about who's putting out these pathological theories about Black people. Black men are not wholesaling murder Black women. Black women are not wholesale murdering Black men and Black children. It is a pathological and racist sentiment about Black people, and we've refuted this stuff for the last 100 years. Again, we have to be extremely vigilant against the groups of people and the white liberal political parties that are utilizing subcultural violence theories that are trying to talk about the character of Black people without any consideration about the economic and political circumstances that these Black people find themselves in. Hell, it's better if we just have a straight debate about the empiricism and the numbers, which nobody seems to provide, if people truly think that there's an ongoing genocide of Black women and girls. But notice that this puts Black men at the helm of being oppressors, which is the same kind of narrative that we're getting from the white liberals as well as the feminists that are trying to paint Black men as they're fundamentally undeserving of sympathy and undeserving of movements trying to reclaim their humanity.
Absolutely.
Can I say something here?
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think we have to also pay attention to how this type of discourse exonerates white people, how it renders white people innocent, how it renders white males in particular innocent, and how when this discourse is used, it's also kind of like a call to white society, white males in particular, and then also white females, a call that says, we want you to rescue us. Save us from these men. Save us from these savages. Do something. Rescue us. All right. Do your missionary thing. Give us the resources that we need. Because what they're saying we're safer outside of the Black community. We're safer around white people. White people are safer than Black people. White males are safer than Black males. Okay. And then also what it does, it also ignores and erases the other aspects of Black women's lives that don't get dealt with. So we're not talking about Black women in hypertension. We're not talking about Black women in Alzheimer's. We're not talking about Black women with obesity, Black women with all sorts of maladies. We're not talking about Black women who are exploited summarily by white society in terms of the educational system, in terms of low pay, in terms of glass ceilings. We're not talking about a variety of things that Black women encounter that subordinate them, that have absolutely nothing to do with Black men. So what happens is that we become the focal. We become the end all be all. We are the thing that determines everything that happens to Black people, to Black females or Black women. And I think that we have to be consistently vigilant in attacking that narrative, because what it does is it lets white people off the hook, white society off the hook. And I agree with Hood Scholar that we have to keep that focus on white supremacy. And we have to be honest that I think that a lot of Black women are not as invested in toppling, in overcoming, in addressing, in challenging white supremacy as Black men. I think that there are many Black women who are comfortable with the system as it is. They want the benefits, and this victim narrative, this constant moan that we're killing them, that we are sexual threats to them. It is a constant attempt to be incorporated and absorbed into the larger society.
You know, can I get into?
Yeah, jump in.
You know, the funny thing about it all to me is, like, oftentimes Black men get typecast as, Tommy Curry would say, people who aspire to mimic white patriarchs, right? But in actuality, my viewpoint on it is a lot of these Black women, and I'm not trying to be dismissive of all Black women, but some group of Black women, it seems to me, are being mimetic of their white female counterparts, and particularly when it comes to feminism. Because over and over and over again, all I hear is Black women reiterating the talking points of white feminism, which in actuality absolves white women from guilt. I mean, we're talking about colonialists, slave owners, segregationists, rapists, abusers, lynchers. They just get let off the hook altogether. And then all of the negativity that white men, because let's look at it, let's face it, white men raped Black women. White men raped Black men and boys also. White women participated in that rape, okay? So now all of a sudden, all of the rape logic now gets pinned onto the donkey of the Black male. I just don't understand how that is flying in a culture that has access to literature that can give them access to all of the historical archives of what occurred to Black people during slavery and during Jim Crow, right? And then also what befuddles me about issues related to violence from Black men in the community is there's also research out there, at least 40 to 50 years of it, that kind of details and explains exactly how domestic violence occurs in any relationship, whether it be, you know, male, female, male, you know, women on women, whether it's lesbian, straight, whatever the case may be, right? Typically, domestic violence is something that escalates. It's bivalent, it's bidirectional. But this is just being explained away because it doesn't fit the narrative of the big Black bad boogeyman, right? And I mean, and Tommy Curry's written on this. Dr. Johnson has talked about it ad nauseum. When is the media, when are other people going to begin to look at this information, the data, the statistics, objective social scientific research based upon internal review boards' approval of projects instead of philosophy, which basically just creates echo chambers where people can just say what they want to say. And if the mantra fits, they just keep repeating it and then it becomes true. When are we going to get past this? Because our communities are languishing. The problems aren't being mitigated. All we have is a hodgepodge of identity politics that ain't getting us nowhere, man. It's like Flintstones, barefoot and spinning his foot, like trying to get the car started, but we're staying in the same place.
Well, the thing with the literature and the facts of everything that has happened historically, that cohort of Black women know that. They know all of that stuff. But they know what side they know which side their bread is buttered on. So they go along with the narrative of Black men being the boogeyman because it's beneficial to them. See, if they deal with Black men and Black men display patriarchal behaviors, which, I've always had an issue with the patriarchal, matriarchal thing, because Black men grow up in a patriarchal society, an overall patriarchal society. And as we get older, we're forced to be responsible in a very patriarchal way. This is Black women complaining about us not being protectors. That's patriarchal. We're expected to be protectors. We're expected to be responsible for children and women. So even if you're out here working as a Black man and you don't have a wife or you don't have a child, you're still responsible for women and children because you pay taxes. And those taxes go towards entitlement programs and things that are put in place to take care of women just in case they're in a bad situation, which came about during a time where women could not procure work the way men could, but it's still in place. So we're still dealing with Black men being in a society that's very patriarchal. And in my personal opinion, I feel like it's just like the old trope of, during Jim Crow, if a Black man was 78 years old, he was still a boy. We're in this society where we're expected to be patriarchs, but we don't receive any of the benefits of it, but we have all of the responsibilities of it. So these women, they see all of this, but it's just like one of the brothers said, they're definitely, it's a power grab. So if they're in a situation, and everybody knows when you get into a relationship, there's always going to be a tug of war. There's always going to be a tug of war, who's going to run the relationship or whatever. What I see in the Black community is the Black community is displaying this on a large level. There's a tug of war over who's going to be in charge of the Black community, whether it's going to be women or whether it's going to be men. And truth be told, men are going to operate in a position, they're going to operate in a way that's going to put them at the helm. But what the women do is they use the Black man as a monster trope to be able to take that power away from them, so that they can actually, they know the deck is stacked against Black men. So they play into that because they know it will give them a position to be a little bit higher than Black men.
Okay.
Well, I'm hoping that that's not the case, man, all the way across the board. But look, you already know my position, and everybody on this panel knows my position.
Word.
If a woman decides that she wants to put you down, she has all of the mechanisms in place to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Black men just don't have those mechanisms. In fact, men in general in this culture don't have those mechanisms, right? Because it's a patriarchal culture and women are to be protected at all times. Look, the second most protected group of people, in comparison to white women, if you're just talking about Blacks and whites and you're talking about women, Black women are more protected than white men. In terms of mass incarceration and death from police violence, because men are typically violent again towards men, right? That's just what the data bears out. I just wish we lived in a culture, man, where we were in concert with each other more than what we are. We were in the 60s, we were in the 50s, right? All of a sudden, here come the 70s, and everything has changed. The entirety of our culture has changed. I don't know if we can ever get back to that point, but I know right now, what we're undergoing is unacceptable. We need a voice. And the only way they're going to listen to it is if we tear some stuff up.
Well, Green Gorilla, my thing with that, with the 70s, I noticed that too. and this is just my theory, I feel like when the 70s came around, I feel like that's when Black people have gotten the most freedom that we've ever had in this country. And I think with that sense of freedom, it gave us choices, and people just started going in different directions on some, oh, we free now, let's run buck wild. I don't know, but I do know that back in the day, we did have more solidarity as far as what was told to me by my grandparents, by my father. Like what we see now is just ridiculous. Like I can tell you right now, and everybody knows the origin of my channel. I honestly believed that, you know, growing up, I would grow up and just have a normal life like a normal Black man. I didn't see all of this craziness coming, not even a little bit of it. And so it surprises me. And to be truthfully honest, there may be some truth to the narrative of a lot of this being pushed online, because when I was growing up, I didn't see all of this. It wasn't until I got online that I really started to see this intense hatred from Black women to Black men, or Black men to Black women. There's always been a little bit of disagreements and dysfunction in the community, but I never saw it to this degree.
Mm-hmm.
Can I jump in right there?
Right. Go ahead.
Because this is one thing I noticed. So we had this this live a couple of days ago, and part of this, and this is why for me it always goes back to white supremacy, right? Part of this is these are media mediated conversations where, so this is why we talk about, this goes exactly to your point, Angryman. Used to be, before we got on social media, a lot of these conversations were with each other in person and behind closed doors.
Mm-hmm.
That changes the whole entire dynamic. Mm-hmm. So like, because I ain't just kind of joking, like I know this is a serious conversation, but one time, right, I walked into this room and it was a group of Black women. And I was like, I put my finger up and I turned around. And I jokingly say that because we know that there are spaces that there are these healthy grievance spaces that we usually have in the Black community where we can just let everything out.
Yeah.
And we don't have to cover anything up. We don't have to filter anything, right? And so these spaces are where all of us, men, women, queer folks, whatever, we just be ourselves, right? Unfortunately, right, if you notice the trend, the movement went from having these private spaces between each other to now it's happening online.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and in movies, right?
And in movies.
But the problem became which people got to have movies where you saw those private conversations and which ones didn't.
Yeah.
You know, right. And that became something that shaped it. Because here's the thing, we talk about feminism, Black feminism in particular, and look, in the early 80s, you'd be hard pressed to find Black women that were not college educated that called themselves Black feminism, that had read bell hooks or, you know, any of these various other figures, Kimberly Crenshaw, you name it. The thing became via people like Oprah, via books written by people like Terry McMillan, the popularization of these Black feminist ideas. They got out into the community, they got out into mass production, and they became things that people internalized. And then all of a sudden, you started to see these kind of films and books coming out more frequently, and you heard their voices more often.
Yeah.
Black men, look, to have what we now see, you know, on YouTube or in the manosphere, in the 80s and 90s, you didn't really see that anywhere. You were lucky if you could go to the barbershop, but then the barbershops kind of began to be, you know, kind of policed in a different kind of way, and the presence got tamped down. So what you ended up seeing was that we had to wait for an Eddie Murphy Raw. We had to wait for a Chris Rock. You know, you may go back to a Richard Pryor, but you had to wait for selective performances to hear Black men's thoughts on a variety of issues. We didn't get the same kind of platform. And just real quick, something somebody brought up earlier about the question of whether or not we'll ever be able to get back to a certain point. One of the things I want to point out that's going on right now, and I've said this, you know, in the last couple of weeks, in 30 major cities, Black men have been, long before COVID, have been unemployed up to 40 and 50% in 30 major cities. So since February, we know 1 out of 2 Black folk have lost their jobs. Which Black folk are we talking about now, right? My contention is that the demographic in our community that's been most consistently employed, Black women, and even though they've been paid less than white women, they've been more readily and consistently employed than many Black men. Those are the women who are losing their jobs now. So we're finding ourselves in a position where Black men and women are in a position we probably haven't seen since the 50s. In the sense that we're finding our feet on the ground in a way that is forcing us to have to negotiate on terms that we haven't had to negotiate on in quite a while.
Yeah, and speaking to what you said about Terry McMillan, one of the things I'll never forget to this day that really stuck out in my mind when that movie first came out, when The Color Purple first came out, my grandmother despised that movie. She despised that movie. And one day, I'll never forget it, I asked her, because everybody, you know, all of the other girls in my family that were younger that read the book, they wanted to see the movie or whatever. And I just asked my grandma, I said, Grandma, why do you dislike that movie so much? Because, you know, I'm a kid. It's a Black movie. You know, I'm watching it. So I said, why do you despise that movie so much? She said, that's not an accurate representation of Black people. And I guess she would know because she grew up, like she was born in the 20s. Like she had parents that grew up in that era, grandparents that grew up in that era. So it's like she said that the way they were acting, she said you can find that, but that's not the norm. She made a point to let me know that was not the norm, and for it to be portrayed like the norm, she said it was shameful.
But repeat this. Can I jump in right here? Like the video on YouTube that I posted on my Facebook timeline, where there's Huey P. Newton, there's Kwanzaa Kunjufu, and then there's Ishmael Reed, and they're having a discussion about The Color Purple, how Steven Spielberg decided to produce the movie, and how popular it was, and how white liberals were perfectly fine with basically cashing in on anti-Black male misandry, and that you would see, and basically his talking point was, you're going to continue to see this because it's profitable. I mean, if you make money. So what you're seeing is neoliberal capitalism leading to the increased narrative, right, or the proliferation of anti-Black misandry, and there's no counter to it because it's not popular. It's not popular to bash women in this culture. It's not popular to look at women negatively, or to hold them accountable for a whole host of behaviors that they're automatically perceived as wonderful. They're victims. They're these fainting heart Victorian hapless creatures that can't actually do things for themselves. So at the very same time, the feminism is requiring men all across the board to acknowledge their agency and their ability to be responsible and to behave in the world as the social equals of men. You got this other counter narrative which just typecast them as these hapless victims, and men are just like, what the hell am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to act and interact with a group of people where the goal line just keeps moving? I don't know how to treat these people. You know, I don't know if I'm supposed to treat them as political equals and to take off the gloves in an intellectual debate, because a lot of times men retreat from the conversation because they don't want to be perceived as somebody that's attacking women. But then on the other hand, if you don't say anything, you're characterized as a wimp for not having the kind of testicular fortitude to actually challenge somebody and hold them up to their BS. So it's like men find themselves like skirting between a Charybdis on one hand, a Scylla on the other hand, and you can't win. You just can't win. My viewpoint on it is now, Tommy knows this, man. At one point, I'm like, well, how can we talk to him? How can we communicate? How can we like create the conditions in which, you know, we can get the conversation going again? And this even goes back to the idea about what protest is actually supposed to be about. Think about it. The civil rights movement in and of itself was protestation in order to get a conversation jump-started. That's what protestation is supposed to be about. You get tangled up, block communication, you go out, you perform a public spectacle, then you get to have the conversation again. You want to know why Black men aren't participating in protests? Because they know it's not going to lead to them being able to have a conversation started. What's the use of trying to protest if you know you're not going to be able to speak your piece? What we're witnessing, in my viewpoint, is epistemic marginalization of epic proportions. Black men don't have a word to say because they can't say a word. Whatever you say is going to be looked at as patriarchal, misogynistic, and you just may as well just be quiet and do what you got to do. That's why you got black men saying, I'm saving myself. I'm going my own way. You know what I'm saying? Like, because they feel like they don't have a choice, right?
Now hold on, fellas. Artisan is got to go, and I want to make sure we get him in one last word. So let me bring him in real quick to drop a word before he loads. Hold on.
Yeah, I was gonna say you could take me down if you wanted to.
Okay, Artisan, can you hear us, brother?
Yeah, I can hear you. I was on mute. My bad.
No problem. Drop us a word before you go. And again, I appreciate you coming. I appreciate you changing your schedule. Give us a word before you have to go.
Damn, Green Gorilla and Hood was saying it all right there. I was like, I'm sitting in the background clapping and shit. Like, yeah, where's my lighter? I gotta light the flame for that. But I'll say, speaking to Green Gorilla's point, he's exactly right. I mean, this whole thing is being jacked. You can't speak, and if you do speak, they don't want you to talk. It's a messed up situation to be in, and that's why I was saying we were born into that trick bag. You're supposed to be all these things, but at the same time, they don't want you to be these things because it takes away from them having some kind of power. My last point I want to say to Dr. Curry's point, where he was talking earlier about where were the males in all of this, that question came up, and to me it is, when you look at this BLM agenda, the males are the transgenders. That's what they consider as the males that are okay with them.
Mm.
Those are the males that they want. The feminine that decide to start presenting themselves as males, because the only way they are accepted as males is if real males are not around. That's the only way that shit works. So that was one of the things that I picked up out of his points that he was making earlier. It's like that's why the BLM is pushed out there. That's why they push the transgenders out there, because the transgenders want to be the acceptable males.
Okay.
They don't want those original toxic masculine males anymore. They don't want them. They only need them for the platform. They don't need them to actually be out in front because they know they will lead. So in essence, it's still women trying to lead, but with a male face.
Okay. Well, thanks for dropping through, Artisan. Appreciate that. I know Dr. Curry has to go as well. So, Dr. Curry, you want to get a last word?
Yeah, look, I think it's important for Black men to have spaces to discuss and talk about their own issues. But I think it's important to recognize that many of the things that we're talking about really does come off the back of a certain kind of economic mobility of Black women that moved into the academy, that are able to identify as middle class, and that have a certain kind of political allegiance that doesn't necessarily serve the best interests of Black people all the time. And I think that what we see right now is a time where Black men are introducing that critique, despite what people are saying about us, right? Because you think about it, for 20, 30 years, Black men have been fed the works of bell hooks that call us hyper-masculine, hypersexual predators, right? And Black men are reacting now in this moment to urge the world to decolonize the way they've always constructed the Black man as a boogeyman and the Black man as a savage. And these are going to be uncomfortable conversations, because since the 1920s and 30s, white people, white researchers, white ethnographers have always appealed to Black women to try to reify their arguments, their negative arguments about Black men. And for the most part, Black women did not respond in that way, because generally Black people have extremely positive views of each other. But in those instances where we do have these conflicts, right, where we do have these debates, it's used as fuel for the negative racist stereotypes that white liberals want to promulgate. So I think that what our task has to be here is to talk seriously, to talk definitely, seriously about how Black manhood has been constructed as danger, right? Has been constructed as something that needs to be killed off so that other groups of Black people can survive. And as you know, this is not a new narrative, because we see this practically in every article, every blog, right? Every post on social media. So we're talking about how certain kinds of gender logics based on Eurocentric notions of femininity and masculinity is still trying to socialize the American public into believing that the only peaceful Black man is a dead Black man. And we have to be vigilant against this, because what's at stake here are black men and boys who are still being killed. That's why this political moment, the protests, are fundamentally ineffective. They're not changing the way that people think. We're not challenging other black people about how they think about black men and boys. And I think that that's why the Man Not was so grounded, because it's trying to provide a theory that exposes that most of our liberal democratic practices, much of our political rhetoric, is in fact an anti-black male proclamation showing why we should be ostracized, criminalized, if not exterminated. Right? Yeah. So we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do to push back on this idea, not simply that black men should lead, but that the kind of humanity that's being taken and vacated from black men can't be allowed to proceed. These are not liberatory arrangements. This is not a liberatory politic, and we need to push back on that.
Yeah, I would have just tell Dr. Tommy the one strike I got on my channel is actually reading part of his introduction of The Man Not, and I titled the video "The Only Real Men in the Black Gynocracy Are White Men," because black men are man nots.
You should have known better than that, BG.
It didn't stay up one day, Dr. Tommy.
This tells you something really quickly. This tells you something about what it means to really question patriarchy. See, the radical feminist interpretation of patriarchy looked at racial arrangements and tried to put themselves in the place of black people and Jewish people. Right, so everything that you see coming out of the 1970s is looking at the black civil rights movement from the 1940s and 50s. It was looking at the Holocaust, and it was white women trying to imagine themselves as a racial minority within the borders of America. But patriarchy historically has always tried to exterminate the out-group male, the men who are not part of the kinship or racial relationship. So when black men are talking about different groups of white liberals, feminists, etc., participating in patriarchy, what they mean is that they're contributing to the kind of genocidal logics and lethal aggression that the state and patriarchs sponsor against out-group men. So the idea that they would give you a strike because you're announcing that the only patriarchs in a white supremacist society are white men who kill and dominate everyone else is absolutely ridiculous. But this goes back to the dishonesty that we have, because we act like the only way we could view a problem is through the lens of feminism and white liberal politics. Somehow when we talk about black people, you could be a progressive, you could be a nationalist, you could be a Pan-Africanist, you could be intersect. There's all kind of ways you could talk about blackness. But the only way that we're given in America and throughout the West to talk about gender is through white liberal feminism. Right? There is something wrong with how we narrow down the political field, and it's costing black men their lives. So we need to be deadly serious about how we're dealing with this problem.
Let me add something here. I think that there's too much at stake. I think that we don't have the luxury of being silent. And I think that we have to deal with the consequences of speaking and raising our voices. It is what it is. These are uncomfortable conversations. People's feelings get hurt. People, get offensive. There are efforts to undermine our careers, our lives, to do all sorts of things to silence our voices. And I think at this point in time, in light of where we are right now, you think about it. It was so difficult to watch that video of George Floyd being executed by that police officer. Just think about that. That's American society crushing black male life. How long do you endure? How long do you remain silent in the face of such execution? At some point you have to be willing to make some type of sacrifice, to risk something. And I think that's what all of us have to do, because we're not protected. It doesn't matter what your class status is. It doesn't matter what your occupation is. It doesn't matter what your sexual orientation is. As a black man, all right, you're still vulnerable. You're still disposable. You are still subject to death. And I think every black man, every generation has had to count the cost and has had to make the decision within himself whether they're going to speak and attempt to be free, or just allow these forces to continue to impinge themselves upon us and to destroy us. So I don't think that we're any different from the brothers who are part of the Black Panther Party. We're no different from Martin Luther King Jr. We're no different from Nat Turner and all the black men who even had the idea of engaging in insurrection. You count the cost and you live with the consequences. And you do so because there's no other way to be. There's no other way to exist. And so these conversations that we're having are imperative. We can't get around them, and we can't dance around, or we can't attempt to be diplomatic. We can't attempt to appease these different audiences who just feel that our voices are meaningless and that we need to be silent.
Facts. I know for a fact I'll never have a corporate job again. I'm gonna be a YouTuber for the rest of my life. There's no way. It'd be like, brother, we saw what you said on YouTube. Look,
I don't. At some point, I think that will change if we continue to speak.
Yeah, it will.
That's why I said black men do not need permission to speak on my YouTube channel, because what they are doing is they're forcing us out of the conversation on a national and a global scale. And so therefore, it's very difficult for you even to be able to devise arguments that can challenge those which are held to be very popular and acceptable within the common discourse, right? So it's up for us to use. The one thing I'll say about this space is it is a grassroots space. It's not a top-down space. It's not a corporate conversation. It's a real conversation for men going through tragedy, misery. This is rooted in pain, right? And we're the only ones actually thinking about it. And at some point, it's going to have to bubble to the surface. There's no denying this. This is going to hit you like a freight train. Either you're going to get ready for it and get acclimated to it, or when it starts slapping you in the face like a freight train, there ain't going to be nothing you're going to do to stop it.
We're gorillas in the mist, man. That's what we are right now.
Green gorilla.
Like the green gorilla. We're gorillas in the mist, man. This is guerrilla roots, man. It's beyond grassroots. Okay. We hit and run.
Yeah,
absolutely. Fellas, I want to give each of you a moment to give your last word, but also let people know how they can support you. If you got a book, tell them the book to check out, what time your show is. Let people know how to get at you. And just real quick, I want to shout out Luther. Appreciate the support on the Cash App. But let's just take it in the order we're seeing on the screen. Give us your last thoughts and how people can support you.
I guess I'll go first. The only thing I want to say in closing is that I appreciate you, brothers, for having me up here. I feel like I'm in the presence of greatness, all these educated, intelligent black men. You feel what I'm saying? We are making a difference. I do know that. If I don't do this for nothing else, I do it for my sons and my son's sons. So I feel like we're actually making a difference, just like Green Gorilla just said. If we continue to speak up, continue to fight for this, it will change. It may take some time, but it will change. But I appreciate all of you fellas for allowing me up here to speak. Anybody that wants to check me out, y'all already know you can check me out on Real Red Pill Table Talk in the afternoons. You could also check me out on Masculine Mercenaries. If you type it in the YouTube thing, it will come up. So I appreciate you fellas, and I'm gonna get up out of here, man. Holler at y'all later.
Hey, much appreciated, Valdez. Thanks for coming through.
No doubt, man. Peace.
All right, peace. GG.
Yeah, well, I'm the G with a PhD, and you can find me on the Green Gorilla channel. I know, sometimes I'm a little profane. I'm passionate about what I'm talking about. I'm just keeping it real. Like where I am is like being in the barber chair, and you got all these. That's how I want it to be. I want it to be like you're on the stoop where the cats are rolling dice and they got blunts being rolled up, and and cats is capping on the bottom of the bottle, because that's how we get down. That's where I'm from. I'm from Fairground Park, constant, block. So. This is what I'm trying to get out. And look, this is how I would talk to my closest associates, my friends, not people in the classroom. So hit me up, man. Come visit the channel. And some of the things you're going to like, some of the things you're not going to like. Sometimes I'm being rhetorical to jar you out of your state of complacency, right? So come join me, man. Come see what I have to say. Come see my content. And if any donations you can make when you get to the page, you can make them then based upon whether or not you find I merited. So peace and love, y'all. And thank you so much for putting
hey, GG, they're wondering if they want to see you and Angryman in the same place at the same time because they think y'all are alter egos.
But that just got dispelled today. Brother has like some sort of crazy ability to be have two streams going at the same time on. But I mean, hey, that's fun, man. But we're brothers of the same kind. Like I remember one time, man, that brother was about to go in on me, but just having that conversation and coming to that understanding, like, look, this space is not about beefing for me. This space is about being man enough to say, hey, look, we're gonna upset each other sometimes, but we still brothers and we get down, we rock with each other like brothers.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the space is about for me. And it's bigger than me and my ego. And it's bigger than him. It's bigger than THasan. It's bigger than Tommy Curry. It's bigger than Ronald Neal. It's bigger than the Hood Scholar and UBGS. It's bigger than all of us. Because it's the men, like Valdez said, it's the men coming after us, bro. Mm-hmm. And the women coming after us. Because if we ain't doing all right, they ain't going to be all right. Mm-hmm. So,
all right. So y'all check out the Green Gorilla channel. He's dropping videos. Go back and check the archive of what he's already put out. Much appreciated. Dr. Neal, go ahead and holler at us, man.
Man, let me just say that it's been an honor and a blessing to be in this space with all you brothers and with everybody who is watching this broadcast. I think that we're in a new and unprecedented moment as Black men, and I think that this conversation that we're having is going to have serious effects on brothers in the future. You can catch me on Facebook. You can catch me on academia.edu. Just look under my name, Ronald B. Neal. If you want to read anything I've written, I have a book called Democracy in 21st Century America, Race, Class, Religion, and Region. But just, I'm not hard to find. And I embrace the grassroots and the brothers from other mothers, and I appreciate the fellowship.
Well, question and a statement. That you want to tell them about the upcoming book, or what's the situation?
Yeah, so you look forward. I'm finishing my book, Beyond Death and Jail: Hip Hop, Religion, and Mass Incarceration. So that should be coming real soon.
Okay, and if you are able to friend Dr. Neal, he's dropping bombs on Facebook. And he does that. It's random. It'll be 3 a.m. He'll drop 8. You got to read through each of them, and they're grenades. So definitely make sure you check out Dr. Ronald Neal on Facebook if you get a chance to. If you don't pass the screening, it is what it is, But if you get through, you'll definitely be edified by what he's dropping.
He's slow on that friend finger now.
But much appreciated, Dr. Neal.
Yes, sir.
All right, Hood Scholar, what's up?
Yo, I just want to say this was a dope birthday gift, hanging out with these fellas, with these other Black men. Everybody rocking with us who's watching this. My closing thoughts are long, so I try to truncate them.
Take your time, man. Take your time.
But I just like overall, big picture, I want the liberation of all Black people.
Okay. And
that's what I care about. But my concern has been, just like the other academics, y'all probably attest to the same story. All I'm seeing is this pretty much overemphasis of like Black women and Black LGBTQI folks are dope, but Black men are trash. Mm-hmm. And I'm just saying that's why I want to be a part of these conversations. I'm like, can Black men be humanized? Can Black straight, or what they say, Black cis heteros men, can they be humanized in the same way that we humanize the rest of Black folks, right? And so that's why I'm like, we gotta focus on Black men. And the other thing is, this is the long part, but I'm not gonna go too long. I actually think we just need to get rid of using patriarchy altogether. Mm. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the historical trajectory of Black thinking, Black thought, we didn't start talking about patriarchy until post-feminist movement. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that, right, there wasn't this like overarching concern of patriarchal powers that's controlling the world. But we always had some type of thinking of there's a problem with white oppression, white supremacy. And the problem with, and so for me, right, if you notice this trend of what I'm saying, even what we've been talking about in the conversation, this trend on recognizing the humanity of pretty much all Black folks, with the exception of straight Black men, you can tie directly to this trend of elevating the uses of this white term of patriarchy. Right? That's a European term. Like, you didn't hear W.D. Du Bois won't talk about patriarchy. Even Frederick Douglass wasn't talking about patriarchy. Like, this whole long history of Black thinkers, they weren't talking about patriarchy until post-feminism. So I'm saying, can we have an African diasporic viewpoint where we recognize our primary problem being white supremacy and white oppression? Because then, along with patriarchy, you have this problematizing of maleness. So if maleness is the problem, then Black men are the problem. And then you get this bullshit. I'm sorry, but this BS is saying that Black men are patriarchal. How can one of the most oppressed groups have patriarchy? So that's what I'm saying. We need to get away. That's why for me it comes back to white supremacy. Move away from this very Eurocentric thinking, these Eurocentric ideas. We get back to our African thinking, our Black thinking, and with that, right, we see the problem is white supremacy. And when the problem is white supremacy, dismantling white supremacy, then maybe maleness isn't inherently evil. So I just want to close on that. I know I can't change people's minds in 30 seconds to a minute, but we got to get rid of patriarchy and get back to Black thinking, y'all. Appreciate the love, appreciate the support. You can find me on Facebook. If you just search Hood Scholar, I'll come up. And thanks for this birthday, y'all.
Hey, man, thank you. I know he's quarantining after the protest before he gets back to the family. So I think this might be the day you can get back to him, right?
This might be the day, yo. I can finally see my daughters. That's the other thing, yo. I got a Black wife and 2 Black daughters, so I love my girls.
All right, man. Well, blessings to you. Blessings to the family, man. Thanks for coming through. Want to shout out real quick Aquateki, Luther, Michael, and Michelle for the support on the Cash App. Appreciate you supporting the show. Now you know I gotta leave you last, BGS, because you've had the most to do with so many of these brothers who are even on YouTube now, who probably wouldn't have been, including myself, without that kind of support. So I wanted to first extend that to you and then get some final thoughts from you on today, as well as where people can go to hear more of what you're doing.
Okay, well, everybody knows you can go to BGS IBMOR and, you know, the infamous BGS IBMOR. Probably, if you can't find me there, one of my enemies should have my name and my channel somewhere on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter. Okay, so I'm not
that Black Pill Bandit.
That Black Pill Bandit. But one thing I do want to say, I would like the Dr. Neal and Hood Scholar to actually consider this. This is a 500-year tipping point because of the automation coming in, these economic systems collapsing around this white demographic decline, okay? Because they can't, there's not enough white people even go around now, okay? So white patriarchal power will actually recede and destroy itself, which is in the midst of doing. Okay, the thing is, this is the first time that you do have a 500-year tipping point. What is our agenda going to be? You know, we have Africa is going to be the dominant force with you know, in the next century. Okay, what kind of bid are we going to put in? What are we going to do? What kind of agenda are we going to put forth? Because now's the time. Like I said, you know, COVID-19 just accelerated everything. Now the metal is hot. The metal is molten. Okay, and everybody knows it. That's how come you have BLM out there. That's how come you have the white folks out there, have the Democrats, the World Economic Forum. This is all over the world. The molten, the iron is hot. The iron is molten. It can be forged in anything that you want it to be. So we have to come together, figure out what our agenda is, put it forth, and push it out there. Okay. Ideas are important right now. We live in a world of ideas. That's what all this is about. This is not physical. These are just ideas being put forth that are hidden. Okay, this is the age of Aquarius. What happens? All the hidden ideas will come to light. Gender, what it means male, what it means to be married, what it means to have children, family formation. All that stuff is up for grabs right now. What are we going to do? How are we going to put this forth? And don't sleep on this. I'm telling all you brothers, especially all you scholars, because you guys are in the academy. You guys make policy, okay? That's the difference between, you guys and us. That's the only difference between you guys and us, okay? You're on the side that makes policy, okay? We're the foot soldiers. We're the ones that project power, but you guys make policy. So together, which is something they don't want to see, which is why they don't like this particular stream. And I want to give shout outs to all the people actually participated. You guys showed up and showed out today, okay? With the donations, with the likes, I've never seen it on Dr. Johnson's channel. And everybody that's here, please subscribe, okay? We need to get Dr. Johnson at least to 10,000, okay? Because that's where the power is going to project it from. Get Hood Scholar and get Gigi, the Dr. Double G out there with 10,000 subscribers, because this shows that we have they have support behind them. So when the academy comes at them, we can actually push back, because they might not listen to one single solitary brother up there in Fresno State that's isolated by himself. But the thing is, 10,000 people show up, okay, with money and with force, and on Twitter, on Facebook, whatever, they will back down, okay? That's been shown. People show out in the streets, all of a sudden cops start going to jail and getting fired, okay? Because people show up and show out. So just like the white folks showed up and showed out because of their agenda, the black people showed up and showed out in the streets for their agenda. We need to show up and show out for our black scholars. Donate, subscribe, subscribe to their Twitter, subscribe to their Facebook. Okay, when they get attacked, when they get pushed back, we need to push back too. Okay. This is very important. This is a one-time shot. You will not get another one, okay? This is it. If you do not get it done here, you don't put your agenda in, you're going to have to wait another 500 years. I'm telling you.
Well, much appreciated, Brother BGS. And I want to say I appreciate everybody that came through today. I'm going to post a couple of videos this week. I've been a little behind, but I was able to upgrade the camera, and I'm going to be doing so again shortly. So things will hopefully be improving on the production end. But at the end of the day, I really do appreciate the support. And please share the video, like, subscribe. We want to definitely get everybody on this platform and quite a few others up, so people can actually hear what they have to say. Because we are not getting, the time.com is not coming to anybody on this panel, including Dr. Curry, to get our sense of what's going on in the world, and it needs to happen. So until that happens, or if it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we have to support our own media, our own thought process, our own critiques, our own analyses, and get them up for mass scrutiny, particularly amongst our own. All right. So I want to thank everybody for the support you've been given. I'm going to shoot up a couple videos, like I said, later this week. I'm going to be talking about Neal COINTELPRO and what that actually means. We're going to be looking at a couple of different things that are going on online that I think directly impact Black men. Matter of fact, BGS, while I got you for a second, I talked to Officer Charles the other day, and I was hoping you and I could engage him in an upcoming show where you and I can kind of, talk him through together. So we'll work on that. I know Officer Charles was in the chat.
Yeah, he's in the chat. He'd be happy to show up. You're one of his heroes. So
it's a powerful brother. Also, there's another brother in Oakland that we'll be talking to soon. I'll be bringing him up. And there's a brother that actually does protection at many of these protests, and he's going to talk a little bit about how Black men in the protest movement are being treated. And those are Black men who are literally going out there to provide physical protection for protesters. And they are being disregarded in many different ways, despite what they're doing. And I'm not even talking about disregarded by mainstream society or the police, of course. I'm talking about within the movement itself. So we're going to be talking to that brother pretty soon. So keep your eyes open. Come to the Dr. THasan-Johnson channel. I'll also be putting up a couple of film reviews in the next couple of days. I reviewed. I'm going to be recording one on Kobe Bryant's Muse, as well as both Creed 1 and 2. And the film Rosewood. So I'll be posting those media reviews for my Patreon subscribers very soon. If you haven't subscribed to Patreon, go ahead and go in there and sign up, and you can get my film reviews exclusive to you. And they're designed to help you talk to your kids, most particularly your sons, about pulling life lessons out of the media that we do enjoy. And that's media that's handpicked and specific for you to sit down with your sons and have dialogue to help prepare them for what they're navigating in the world.
So you don't have to go all the way up to Fresno State and sit in the class to get this lesson and pay that. What is it now? $6,000 tuition fee.
You know, it's getting rough. I mean, I'm trying to tell people CSU is the largest college school system in the country, but within its first year, 70% of Black male students drop out.
Wow.
So the largest university system in the country it loses its Black male students by 70% in its first year.
Because we've lost them before they even get there.
Yeah, and we're talking about the ones that got in. We're not talking about the ones that were filtered out of K through 12. Mm-hmm. And that's why I wanted to do this panel as diverse as it is, because many of us have dealt with that exclusion to different degrees. Those of us who are sitting on this panel. And so I wanted to kind of show that kind of connection and solidarity across occupation, education, class. Hell, you can even name skin color, whatever dynamic you want to deal with. We're talking about that, and I want to show that brothers are definitely in dialogue across all of those different contexts, across ideology, across political background, because there's something going on with Black men that is not being discussed anywhere else and needs to be, and Black men have to be the ones to do it.
Yeah, because it's programmed, it's actually designed this way. There's been many books about saying how it's designed, and unfortunately, whether it's by commission or omission, our Black women are not providing that kind of support that we need. So I don't know which it is. I think it's more like omission rather than commission. I think they're doing it blindly. I think they're following what they see in front of them, and following what has been passed down for the last 150 years. Because this didn't just start. It started way back before the Mohawk Conference of 1890, where Black men were not supposed to be educated. Yeah. And we have carried that line consistently right up until the present.
Absolutely.
So if you want, and the sisters want better Black men, but they don't want to train them.
Well,
and so we have to do it ourselves. SYSB, and we have to save ourselves. They've actually told us that we got to save ourselves.
All right. Last word to BGS. Thanks for joining us. I'll see y'all soon. Peace.
All right, peace.